we are electing not to spend the money on this.
I'm
going to need you to sign off.
Move closer to my shirt pocket and speak clearly.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Cardin Compliance. How's it going, Donna?
It's going great, David. How about you?
I'm doing good. My son is, for those of you who listen for a while, he joined the Air Force recently. So he's through basic, he's through his tech school, and he is home for the next few days before they send him off over the pond.
Yeah, long way away.
Lovely South Korea. So I'm sure if anybody follows anything in the news, you probably know why he's going to South Korea.
That's right. So hope for safe travels and he stays safe over there, but he's doing his job.
Yep, doing his job. He got.
Is he a grown man now? He left a boy. He's back a man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because he's changed in a lot of ways, but we're from a small town, so we don't get exposure to certain things like going to the airport very often. A taxi ride is something that's never happened. So when he had to take a taxi, he was like, "Okay, what do I do? What's the process?" And I'm like, "You got to call them. They'll come get you." Because, the thing you see on TV is you see some guy standing out, by a corner hollering at somebody driving by.
Yeah.
That's what we see. So we, in the small towns, we're going, okay, we don't really know how to do taxis.
Yeah. They're not riding around here looking for me.
Right. So it's been fun. I'm having to book his flights for him because he's never had to do that. So, you don't have a whole lot of access to internet and stuff like that while you're in training and all that. So,
well, good old dad. Well, at least he's going to learn about airports, being in the Air Force and all.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. So,
well, but congrats for having him home, and that's why we're going to get this done in a hurry today, so you can go spend time with the boy, soldier boy, as you called him.
Yeah. So let's cover what we always cover first. Where in the world can we be found here in the next few months?
Where can we be found?
Where can we be found? So, but first we have coming up, the HIPAA Boot Camp. Speaking of Soldier Boy, if you need more information on the HIPAA Boot Camp, it is at thehipaabootcamp.com. We have it coming up in August 24 and 25 in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And this will be our second one. We had great fun at the first one.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot of work, but it's fun.
Yeah,
and it's a great discussions and stuff. So we already got people signing up, and we the special early bird pricing, as we call it, we're doing for those who couldn't make it last time. We're extending an early bird thing before we raise the price, and that's August 1st. And this may be the last podcast before that happens.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, we record in advance, so who knows? I make that up as I go.
Yep. So if you're interested in that, please absolutely go to the HIPAAbootcamp.com. Get information if information is not there that you need. Like if you need a quote, send to your boss. Inside joke. Let us know. We'll make it happen. And then in September, I'll be speaking in Washington, D.C. at the Unconvention. It's an IT conference. So if you're not in IT, ignore me. If you are in IT and you're going or want to go, it's September 16 to 17. You can find out about that at unconvention.io.
You're still available to be ignored, though, if you're
IT you can still go and ignore me. That's fine. Mm-hmm. A little harder to do, though, I would say, when I'm near you.
Yeah, it is. Trust me. So in September, right after you get back from D.C., I'm doing a Georgia HFMA Care Forum. It's a compliance, a lot of different compliance topics, and I'm the HIPAA topic. And that's in Sandy Springs over on Pill Hill on September 22nd. Then in October, I'm in Kennesaw at North Metro MGMA. Then November, I'm doing back-to-back Georgia HFMA Fall Institute at Reynolds Plantation at Lake Oconee, which is a really cool place here in just outside of Georgia, and it's awesome. And that's on November 8th. And then November 10th, Georgia Association of Orthopedic Executives. So we got a few other things that we're talking about. We're getting back into conference season. So that's when I get worn out. But we've been able to maintain the podcast, at least.
Yep. So we did have a question come in, actually, from this week.
And I can't remember whether or not we've talked about this before, but, it's a new one, so we're going to go with it.
Yeah, so listener wants to know, other than HIPAA, what else do we do? I guess, was it in our off time or just what do we do, period?
Well, we talked last episode about what we do for a living. So I'm thinking this would be more like hobbies and things that you do for fun. And, for you, that's a bit more complicated with all them childrens.
Yeah. Mine's very complicated. Sometimes my hobbies are pretty much whatever the boys are interested in at the moment. So I can, use that time to, spend with them and do things. But, of course, being highly competitive, anything I can get them in that they're competing with me, I'm down for that.
And so what do you do when they beat you?
It doesn't happen often, but let me assure you that when I win, everybody knows. And
I am not surprised.
So when I lose, I usually get it back in return. So it gives me an opportunity to show them how to gracefully say, you did well. If you beat me, you did well. I don't like doing it, but...
You got to be the dad.
Yeah, there are times when it could happen. I used to be, I'm a gamer at heart from way back when. So it's funny, my kids, they still think they can beat me in certain games, and they hate it when I win because I don't play very much anymore. But they do all the time. But for the most part,
you shoot the wrong people.
Oh yeah, I will. But for the most part, I try to stay away from things I know that I'm clearly not going to have a chance in.
Well, the triplets are getting older now, so you're going to lose more often, I think.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, I find myself. It's funny, it changes often. I don't know about you, but I find myself doing things differently now than used to. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm always in kind of a learning mode. I've kind of found myself getting to where I enjoy just learning new things, whereas 10 years ago, that's the last thing I wanted to do was learn something. So, if you know anything about my past, I used to be heavily into martial arts. So 10 years ago, I preferred just to punch people in the face and get punched in the face. Now it's a little more calm, but still, I'll take an opportunity anytime to put some gloves on.
Yeah, well, that's not my thing. Although when we were kids, we did a lot. They bought us boxing gloves when we were kids because they thought it would be funny.
Hell, it is.
It was funny. We boxed and it was great. But for me, I'm a nerd no matter what it is. I want to know everything about it. So no matter what the adventure might be, I get into that, and I still have a love of sports. And although all those years of playing sports recklessly has left many parts of my body wanting to jump loose at my age, I'll try to play with the kids and that kind of stuff. But I love family time, but mine's usually getting people in trouble and not setting necessarily the best example, but still a good example. And, I like to, do, travel, fun and interesting people and new and interesting places. That's my favorite thing. I like to go out and venture, and, I can walk by an interesting bug and spend 10 minutes.
Oh, wow, look at this. I know, I get the pictures from you.
So, yeah, that's me. It's just I wander through life going, what looks interesting?
Yeah. Now, I will say one of my fun things to do, especially if I got a crowd of people around, or I like doing things that invoke a shock value because I find it hilarious. You know that about me. So I will say or do something. Usually I'd say something, especially if my wife's around. I'll say, because she's got long hair, so she will completely hide herself inside of her hair. It's like cousin it. It's so funny. But anyway, so that's what I do for fun.
For fun. But, I like doing cooking. That's a family thing. And I got friends that are chefs and that, and mixology. I like mixology. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everything from wine tastings and bourbon tastings and, visit the brewery. You can only see how beer is made so many times, and then you just skip that part and go right to the drinking room. But that's what we like to do for fun. So, well, let's knock out this interesting topic for today.
So I guess drinking is probably a good segue into this topic.
I know, I thought so.
So I've been asked this before, and it's really good that you brought this up and created the show notes for it. But I've been asked several times, as a compliance officer, am I personally liable for XYZ? And that invokes a lot of different discussion about whether that's the case. And so we're going to cover that today. Are you, as a compliance officer, are you personally liable if the place you're working at is not doing compliance, or you're signing off on things saying they are doing compliance or whatever? But what does that look like? And I think we've got some interesting things to cover today that may leave more questions than answers.
I know, really. Let us start with our disclaimer, though.
Yeah.
We're not lawyers.
We're not lawyers, but I do play one on TV.
Okay. I knew it was coming. We're not lawyers. We are not offering legal advice. Please do not hang your hat on this. If you go to jail, we're not paying.
Yeah. Well, so, there's one thing we do like to stay in a lot of times, we do like to stay in the realm of kind of black and white. This one's kind of more of this is more speculative, this episode, but I do think,
know.
But it does, we do need to sometimes think about it. Okay, sometimes you can see the writing on the wall, even though it's not here yet. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So there's always been some concern about a privacy officer and personal liability. So you have found a recent settlement agreement between the FTC and a chief compliance officer of MoneyGram. Doesn't have to do anything with HIPAA, but tell us the story.
Yeah. So the story goes, and it's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And we're just not going to mention that again. So the government made an announcement in May, and they were involved. And this has been going on for years, by the way. The case has been strung out for years, but it's company called MoneyGram, and they wire money and stuff like that. And
it's Western Union, I believe, right? Western Union MoneyGram.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Pretty sure.
But the bottom line is they were doing fraudulent activity, and like millions, lots of zeros on the end of a dollar sign was involved in their fraud case, and the company settled for millions of dollars. A while back, I want to say like 2012 even. And this is the case against the chief compliance officer.
Okay.
And their original, now before we even go down the path of what the settlement was, they originally said, okay, chief compliance officer, you knew this was going on. You were obligated as the compliance officer to document these failures and sanction these people for what they were doing, and you did nothing. And you didn't file paperwork that would have shown that this was going on, and you kind of fudged on some stuff. So more or less, you didn't necessarily wire the money yourself, but you turned a blind eye to it. It was like the culture was going to let it happen, and you kind of let it happen, or you were involved, whatever. So we say you owe us $1 million.
Ooh, $1 million? Like with a little pinky beside your...
$1 million.
Wow.
And that's where he started. So he's been negotiating for a while. So they just settled in May. The official settlement was on the liability case against him, and he settled with a penalty payment of $250,000 and a 3-year restriction on working in the compliance industry and financial.
Oh, wow. So he's got to find a job doing something different.
You want fries with that?
Yeah. And nowhere does it say what his attorney's fees were.
I know, really. So, obviously he was making a killing at this before. And they knew that, so they were going to say, give me that money back.
He probably runs an investment firm now.
Yeah, I know. But, the thing is that these folks made millions and millions of dollars, and you have to wonder, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio between fraud and how much money we ask back from them and the damages that fraud may have occurred on individuals. We talk enough about identity theft and the things that happen to individual patients when that happens and how much it affects people's lives at the lower level, the micro level of what really happened. So you don't really know how much of that took place in this scenario, but they made it clear that the chief compliance officer turned a blind eye at minimum, if not made it an acceptable practice, did not file the paperwork, did not document, did not attempt to sanction these people that were involved in this mess. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we're going to need some money from you. You're going to need to struck us $1 million check. Wow. So, now $250,000, tons of legal fees, because I said this has been going on for years, and 3 years of you can't do what you have done for your career. Mm-hmm. So that in itself is substantial. So, the retirement plan and all that may have been wiped out. I don't know, those financial people, you always assume they've got some money in some tax haven somewhere in the Caribbean, but clearly, clearly he at least hung on to some of his. But what this brings up is there's been a lot of discussion about, is this putting a stake in the ground, so to speak, with what they are going to do in enforcement cases for compliance officers if they feel like they allowed this to happen. So, dumb.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Just the facts, man. Only the facts. To me, I've read it closely. As previously mentioned in this episode, I'm a nerd. So, I'm reading what the statutes say and trying to put it all together in my brain because, I'm aware of some of this stuff that might be happening. If I were to come upon that occurring, then I might be aware of it. And does that, trickle down effect happen to me? So I do care. And there's plenty of cases where you and we've even talked about it, where they say HIPAA schmippa.
Yep.
They don't want to deal with it. So the question I was trying to answer in my research was, that was the financial stuff. Mm-hmm. How does it apply under HIPAA?
Right.
And our answer has always been the HIPAA law itself does not include a enforcement option of personal liability.
Right.
It is against the company, whether it's a covered entity or a business associate, unless there was malicious intent involved. Mm-hmm. So if you were trying to defraud somebody, you were in the middle of committing a crime or you intended to do damage in some way with this access or acquisition of patient health information, that can get turned over to the Justice Department, and it can involve penalty and up to 10 years in prison. And there are some people that are experiencing that. That's new. They hadn't been used a lot, but it is a thing. And based on the breaches that we've discussed and the people, the insiders, and the activity, I'm certain there's a lot of those cases floating around out there now. Mm-hmm. But that's always been our answer is, technically just being the compliance officer doesn't necessarily leave you on the hook. But I got, when they set a precedence for a reason.
Right.
And this just happened in May. So we're not talking, it wouldn't have happened under the new regime or this or that. It did. So this is a direction that we are drawing a line in the sand, so to speak, at least in the financial markets. But you've got to assume that direction is going to be sent across the board, because where do you think this penalty money goes? It goes back in the coffers. And if people are committing crimes and we can get that money, then that's, fills a hole that's out there, so to speak. So while those HIPAA criminal penalties don't exist to the compliance officer, other laws still apply. It's not like HIPAA's over here in a vacuum, and because you're under HIPAA, the other laws don't apply.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you get involved with the False Claims Act.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, the times I've been asked the question about whether or not they're going to be liable because they're a compliance officer, I've not had it asked to me because they were doing something nefarious. It's more of like, if my boss man is not going to follow HIPAA, am I going to be held liable? Or, if the practice does something and makes a mistake, am I going to be personally held liable? And so, that's where we've always said, no, you're not. In those cases, you're not.
Not under HIPAA anyway, that's for sure.
Right.
I mean, there's always gray areas. It's always a fact-specific determination. As the
you like
lawyers
that,
say.
don't you? Yeah.
Yes. That's what the lawyers say. I mean, that means something to lawyers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When lawyers use a phrase, pay attention.
But, I just don't want all of our compliance officer people stopping the recording and going, resigning their job before they finish. I know some people are probably on the, they're
panic
like
setting in, right?
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm done. I'm not.
I'm out. Peace out. Yeah. See you tomorrow. No, just kidding. Not going to be back. But yeah, I mean, this is not any known thing. And again, it has to do with what the guy wasn't doing, which what he wasn't doing was documenting anything and sanctioning anybody and all of those kind of things. And frankly, we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talked about like the audits and documentation and all these pieces, if you're in that position with the boss man, as you say,
working for the man.
But if powers that be, we'll say, do not want to follow your advice, or there's an entire section of the requirements you're not meeting, and they're saying we're not going to fund it, we're not going to implement, whatever, all you need to do to protect you personally is document to them, here, I have to be able to say 5 years from now why we decided not to do this. So I need you to write this here. I've written this paragraph based on what you've told me. We are electing not to spend the money on this. I'm going to need you to sign off.
Move closer to my shirt pocket and speak clearly.
I'm not leaning in. Don't worry about that. I read an article that's positive body language. That's why I'm leaning in. Or talk to my briefcase. Yes, it's a new briefcase. But what's important is that you're documenting that you're trying to do the right thing and that you're not turning a blind eye to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're given that position, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, they'll post on some of the listservs and they're like, I've been asked to be the HIPAA compliance officer. What does that mean? No one has a positive, hey, that's a great.
Awesome. You got a promotion.
They'll be, you better be getting a lot of money.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. But the most important part of understanding the False Claims Act and the pieces that you need to make sure you're documenting to protect yourself. And, it's like the sanction policy, for example. As a compliance officer, technically, all you're supposed to do under the sanction policy is recommend the sanction to HR. You're not supposed to implement it. You're supposed to recommend it. And if you recommend it to HR and they don't do it, you've still done your job as the compliance officer.
Mm-hmm.
You just document it.
That in and of itself is a load off of people, because I know more than one person that I've come across, even here lately, that, they get bent all out of shape because, somebody's been there for 15 years and they're doing something wrong. And they're like, our sanction policy says they have to be sanctioned. And the doctor's like, nah, I'll just talk to them. It'll be okay. And then the compliance officer just goes into a tizzy when, like I said, what you're saying, honestly, that one thing is worth the cost of admission for this episode. Calm down, document it, and move on. It's not your responsibility.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. the biggest part of what we're trying to say here is times they are changing. We know that everywhere. We know that criminal activity is changing. We know that legal ramifications are changing. Everything's changing. All you need to do is make sure you have clear documentation. Oh, you know what? We're just going to say you need to comey it.
Comey it. Yes, oh Lord, now he's a verb.
You need to comey it. Write it down, and do it right then, not afterwards, because that was the key as far as legally covering him so far. And again, we won't know any of that long term, but the key was he wrote it down right after it happened. And he showed others that he wrote it down right after it happened. So
if he didn't document it, it didn't happen.
That's right. Had he not done it right then and had witnesses to see that it happened right then, a whole different ballgame. So, everybody seems to be believing what he's doing because he did that. Okay, fine. You just follow that whole comey it. Comey it over.
You got to call me over.
Comey, don't play that. We're gonna have some fun here.
Lordy.
But
moving right along.
But there was this paper that, and I couldn't find a date on it. I'm not quite sure how old it is, but like I said, things are changing. It's hard to know, but it was a good paper. We'll have a link to it. Who Goes to Jail? A Guide for HIPAA Privacy Officers, which I thought, who goes to jail? We're trying not to say. That's why I'm not going to use that as the title.
Mr. Smith.
But who goes to jail? And it's Edward F. Malone, Esquire of Chicago. He's in a law firm in Chicago. And props to that title that you're bold enough to make it. But it was talking about the False Claims Act. And the quote says, it punishes a defendant for knowingly or with reckless disregard for the truth, making false statements to the government in connection with a claim for money or reimbursement. The False Claims Act can apply even when the actual request for payment is neither false nor fraudulent. Liability can be imposed when a defendant, as required by the government, certifies that it is in compliance with a separate statute, law, or regulation in order to obtain payment when it is, in fact, not in compliance with that statute, law, or regulation. What does that say to you, David?
Yeah, I need to take this to family court.
Yeah, it's talking about telling the government, not you.
Oh, okay.
We don't care about you. We don't care about you at all. But can't get to family court. Yeah. All right, but anyway, back to the topic at hand. What that is saying is it's referring to think about meaningful use. Okay. Mm-hmm. And hello, we've talked before that MACRA includes the requirement for security risk analysis, and it's actually quite different than just the ones that were in the original meaningful use monies. And when we've heard that a substantial number of people are getting that meaningful use money still. So if, and again, it is knowingly or with reckless disregard for the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, making false statements in connection with a claim for money or reimbursement. That's what meaningful use is. You are requesting money or reimbursement from the government, and they're saying, here's what you have to certify to, and one of those is a security risk analysis.
So you mean for all those people who said, I've got all this meaningful use money, and then my question is, great, let me see your security risk analysis, and they go, oh, we hadn't done one of those. You're saying that's fraud?
Yeah. We're falling under knowingly then, So you better be able to document you had no idea until right now you needed one, or that what you've done in the past, a quick spreadsheet, that's not enough. But, making an attempt is the most important part. But if you know you've never done one, I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are the one that certifies and makes that request and you know you've never done one, technically you're falling under the False Claims Act. and there's also some Medicare fraud acts and all that kind of stuff. So it could fall under those. But the important point is you got to pay attention. If you're doing an insurance claim, and a lot of people think a Medicare claim as you're filing fraudulent insurance claims. That you do the Medicare fraud, you're filing claims for either work you didn't do or a higher level, or like some of them, pills that you didn't actually give a patient, and then you turn around and sell them. So there's a lot of that that everybody thinks about, but it is technically under the law as bad to say, hey, I know we met all these requirements to get that meaningful use money, and secretly that you didn't. Or with reckless disregard, which is the turn the blind eye. So the good point, though, is the same paper does go on to say that privacy officers are not exposed to a greater risk of criminal liability than other employees solely on the basis of their position as a privacy officer. Unlike the corporation is as an entity, they cannot be held criminally liable for another employee's criminal act.
Good to know.
Yeah, so if you didn't do it, you can't be held liable unless you're involved in that. And it does make the point of saying privacy officer cannot be held criminally liable for a criminal violation committed on, quote, their watch, which is what we all worry about, unless they themselves also participated in the criminal act through planning, actually participating in, or covering up its commission. So what this case that the Moneygram case said is basically they were covering it up because they knew it was going on and they didn't take action on it.
Right.
So the short answer to the question is, are your HIPAA compliance officers, can they be held personally liable? We don't know.
Now that we've got this far.
No.
But we warned you, it was speculative.
but you think about all these things where, you've got, if you're being investigated and you have to answer questions and provide information, if there is a potential breach and you have to do the 4-factor assessment, are you telling the truth? Are you making decisions? Those things start to fall into that gray area, and thankfully they're not venturing down those paths. That's the best news yet, is we don't see that happening. But that meaningful use money, they're asking questions. We used to be we've done these audits many times, the meaningful use audits, and they ask for the risk analysis, and we would just send them the one-page summary, because they don't ever send them way more than they ask for, because you can't baffle them with BS. Overwhelming with paperwork. That doesn't go well for you. So we send them the summary page, and that's usually been exactly enough, because it's detailing out the overall process and the results in the executive summary. And for the first time ever, we recently had a client who said, they're asking me to show them how we got to these answers. And we were like, well, that's interesting. We were just telling them what pages of this giant report we give them. We give them, 20 PDFs because I'm anti-paper. Where do I get it? Which ones are the ones that answer this question? But it was interesting that the backup information was being asked for the first time. So don't know if it was just somebody having a bad day, felt like they needed to get up in somebody's crawl. Don't know. But overall, it's going to be interesting to watch. And I assure you that when we talk about documenting everything, we're not kidding.
Yeah. Even
if you're doing it to protect your own, CYA.
So now you're looking at documentation for, internal processes and procedures and policies and all that. Then you have another set of documents where you're documenting to cover yourself personally. We hope you're keeping this somewhere besides on a server or a workstation in the office.
Yeah.
Just saying. Be smart about where you store that information.
Yeah. It's, the cloud. is a good thing, but not PHI unless you have a BAA. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So you don't want to bring people into it if you don't have to. And as long as you're doing the best you can with what you got to work with and you can prove that, you should be fine.
Maybe we'll start another service for that. Storing the documentation for covering, we call it CYA.com.
No. It's like that YouTube video of the two little twins, the babies in their diapers standing by the stove. Yeah. No. And they're clearly having a conversation. One of them showing the other the foot. They got one sock on, one sock off. I love it. But that's hilarious. The way I feel like when I'm talking to you.
Yeah, that's usually about halfway through the night. You're usually talking to me that way.
Oh, you claim this. People think I'm just a lush, but
I heard you say something about pedicab, and that was the end of it.
Well, that was a fun night, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a video somewhere. There's a video somewhere out there.
That was a hoot, man. That dude was cool.
Yeah, he was. Anyway, so anything else you want to add to that? Now that all of our compliance officers are somewhat, sweating profusely as well as being somewhat relieved.
No, I mean, I just want to reiterate that it's not something we think is, if somebody's going to be knocking on your door, the men in black will be knocking on your door soon. But it is something to be aware of because you want to be documenting now in case this does actually change because you can't go back.
Yeah. So when you get that letter in the mail, be like, let me go back and document everything for the last 2 years.
I know. Worry about it now just in case because it's a big problem if you don't.
All right. Very good. All right, folks, that's our show for today. We want to thank you for listening. As always, you can head over to iTunes or Stitcher and give us a review. You can also review us on many social media outlets as well as share it out. And we do appreciate all those of you who do share that out all the time. Head over to helpmewithhippa.com if you want to leave a question right there on our page. You can also find all the podcasts. And don't forget the HIPAA Bootcamp at thehippabootcamp.com if you want information about that. So for Donna and myself, remember, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.